The wonderful thing with online events is that we can be anywhere in the world and participate. I'm today in Mill Valley, just north of San Francisco, literally in the woods. I will show you later, but there's not enough light yet. It's just dawn. And I see people from Europe, several countries in Europe actually, and from the US. I don't think I've done a Tech Live with such a large audience ever. So, Fred, congratulations for pulling this off, and let's enjoy some of the positive side benefits of online meetings. I really enjoy Tech Live because I come here about once a year, and every year it gives me a moment to reflect about what we've done in a year and how much we've progressed, and to look at the presentation I showed the year before to you. And this year is an especially good year, and I will share that with you. Just a couple words on Scality. We have here with us also Paul Speciale and Giorgio Regni, both of whom many of you already know. So you'll be able to address more technical questions with them. And I'm sorry, but my agenda is such that I can only be with you for 1 hour. So any question that you really want to address to the CEO, make sure you address in the first hour until 7 a.m. PT, which is probably 3 or 4 p.m. Yeah, that is not helpful. Probably 3 p.m. UK time. Okay, with this, I'll share my screen. Okay, so let's get in. I mean, if I talk to you about digital transformation, you're going to tell me it's cliche. Everyone talks about it, and everyone has this chart, more or less. The number here of storage capacity growth comes from IDC, and everyone uses the same. So yes, I agree. It's cliche and all this, but it's nonetheless very real. We have conversation again and again with large enterprise, governmental bodies, telcos, and they truly experience that. And they truly wonder, okay, well, so the world is changing, a world of IT is changing. How do we manage this? I had not so long ago, it was about 6 months ago, I had a conversation with the CIO of a very large bank, one of the top 20 banks in the world. And I talked to him about his move to the cloud and what his strategy is. And the guy tells me, with a little bit of a tear in his eye, we haven't even completed the virtualization of our IT infrastructure, and we need to go through virtualization before we can think about anything cloud. So, you've got the talks, and everyone talks about future, and then you've got the reality in many enterprises where they're in a journey, and it's not so easy to transform an IT. I'll say an anecdote from Scality, and Scality is a pretty modern organization, and we started in 2009, so we've tried to build our IT to be very modern. We have a completely cloud IT, all good. We have a provisioning system that's one login, and that gives us login to every of our system, except that we deployed one login in 2015. So really, we had the first 5 years of the company with basically ad hoc login tools because these SaaS services didn't exist yet, and we still have free provisioning system in such a small company as Scality. And when I tell our IT department to just standardize everything, they explain to me at length why it's not so easy. And this is for a company that is modern by design and that is really thinking about IT. So when you're talking to large banks or other entities, their challenge is very real. And you just don't change overnight, even if you need to, if you need to do that. So, our mission at the end of the day is to help them through this challenge. And one of the things that is a big, big evolution this year is the reality of hybrid cloud use cases, especially around data. Now, really, a complete transparency where I put a given workload on-prem or in Azure or in AWS or in Google, depending on what is the cheapest every day. And, that's today out of reach and not real. This being said, there are use cases and there are activities where hybrid cloud is real today, and we have customers actually having a hybrid architecture. Whether it's for cloud archive, where people will use Glacier on equivalent service for very, very, very cheap storage, things that they store because they have an obligation to store it, but they don't ever expect to have to retrieve it. Compute bursting is also very real, where you copy a set of data to a cloud because the compute there will be cheaper, especially if you can buy some spot instances. This is very much used for banks' risk calculations at night. A lot of AI is done in this way, where the data is sent to a given cloud and then computed in the cloud. And then, once you have the results, you can just disregard the data. You just close the instances and disregard of the data. You don't have to bring the data back, so you don't have egress fees. And one that we're seeing on the rise is disaster recovery. And you'll see later, we'll present one of our customers who has been able to save a lot of IT costs. They typically were doing disaster recovery the traditional way, which is they had 2 data centers and they were mirroring everything from one data center to the other. Well, for this, you need to pay the infrastructure for 2 data centers. I mean, the cost of your infrastructure when you do this is like 2.5x. And what they figured out, and we helped them figure out, is that they could actually mirror in a cloud. In that case, it's AWS. And so now they have their data center, and they have the disaster recovery site is actually AWS. And by doing this, they save tremendous amount of money, because in AWS, they don't need to have the whole infrastructure. They can just have what's enough to be able to spun up instances quickly if they have to move to the disaster site, which again is the cloud in that case. So you probably all know that we launched Zenko a few years ago with the belief that the world would go multi-cloud. We were probably a little bit early with Zenko. Last year, when we announced Ring 8, we decided to take some of the core of Zenko technology and make it as an option to the Ring technology, and we call this XDM, Extended Data Management. And we are seeing customers, Ring customers, take this to do one of these 3 use cases that we're seeing here. So for me, that's a big change over the past 12 months. So where does all the data come from? In a way, we're a company that's addressing a very large niche. So we don't try to be a multi-purpose storage, but there are things around unstructured data that we do very well. And unstructured data is the piece of the data right now that is really growing the fastest. So a lot of content creators, genomics more and more, insurance, intelligence services all around the world, hospitals, cloud providers serving their own users, broadcasters, banks, seismic exploration, online content of all kinds and user-generated content, research, and telecommunication. Telecommunication, both for their customer, but also for their own use, like storing logs and doing security analysis generates a lot of data. By the way, each of the photo vignettes here corresponds to one of our customers. We didn't want or had the permission to name them here, but it's also through this slide want to represent how much Scality is really present all around the world. You've known us around North America, US, Canada also. We're more and more in Latin America as well, all throughout Europe, and an extended view of Europe up to Russia, where we have more and more customers. You find us in Qatar, you find us in Israel, you find us in various countries in Asia, and including Japan, obviously, where we have a big office, and Australia and New Zealand. So we're truly operating worldwide. It's an interesting challenge, but customers are happy worldwide. We focus on 5 verticals. This is something that I had said here at Technology Live last year. This is even more true this year. We have incredible win rates. We win 53% of our qualified opportunities. Once we do a proposal to a customer, we typically win 74% of the time. And the way we do this and we achieve these win rates is by focus. And so we focus on 5 industries or 5 verticals. Healthcare, both with hospitals. We now serve about 40 hospitals, and with genomics, so research essentially. If anyone wants to interrupt me, I cannot see the screen of the room. Yeah.
A question just came in from Chris Evans. He's saying, Jerome, can you give us an idea of volume of data under management and number of customers? So volume of data under management and number of customers. It's in the chat. Thank you, Chris.
So data under management, I know is in the exabytes dimension. I don't know how many exabytes, but we're past the EB range. So, several exabytes. And number of customers, it's around 300 and something. And Paul, could you tell me what's the exact number of customers? You probably have this handy.
It's just north of 340 as of right now.
Oh, 340. And please, when you compare this number of customers with other companies, remember that Scality tends to have larger customers, larger deals. Our ASP for first deal with customers is typically $260K for us, which really means that it's $1 million project for the customer. So we serve very large entities, and 80% of our customers reorder after in the first 24 months. So these are very, very big deployments. So hold on, I'm going to try to see the chat so I don't have to ask Fred every time. No, it doesn't work. Hold on a sec. Chat.
I can read them out. That's no problem at all. So the next one is from Rob Pegler. Who do you consider your major competitors?
Oh, it's really simple. It's EMC. I mean, Dell EMC. We compete against Dell EMC in 60% of our pursuits. The number 2 is NetApp. We compete against NetApp in 30% of our pursuits. And then we have 4 competitors that are about 15% each. And they're significant, but not that significant. Everyone else is noise.
Okay. And another question. This is from Anthony Adshead at Computer Weekly. What is the average data volume per deal? The average...
I'm a CEO, so I know much better the dollar volume per deal than the data volume per deal. But it's probably around, I'd say, 3 petabytes. Now, Anthony, this is for the first deal. This is when we start with the customer. So it's a few petabytes. Let's say typical is 1 to 5 petabytes as the initial deal. But again, I want to stress that 80% of our customers will reorder capacity in the first 24 months.
Okay. Well, we can try and find out more exact numbers, Jerome, and get back to these guys with more exact answers, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. On it. Any more questions, guys? Nope. Okay, Jerome, carry on, please.
Yes, just one for me,
hold on.
Bertrand. Sorry. More or less, plenty of companies choose to externalize totally their data. How do you overcome the competition of people as AWS and this kind of guys?
We love them. We love them. They're partners. Look, there are, the discussion in IT between insourcing and outsourcing is as old as IT. So there are always going to be companies that prefer to go full outsourcing. There's companies who do insourcing. There's companies that will do a mix. And that pendulum will swing many more times. So what we really believe is that the future of the world is multi-cloud. anyone who goes on only one cloud, we just tell them that they're taking a really huge risk of being married to one provider, and that we've seen in the past, and everyone has example how when you restrict yourself to just one provider, you can really become a slave of that provider, and you have to suffer price increase year over year. So we don't think that going to one provider is a really good idea. Now we know people who've chosen this. I had a fascinating conversation with the CTO of Expedia, who went all the way on AWS, and we were discussing back and forth why they did this and what are the risks they take and what are the risks that they cover by doing this. And I can understand his decision, but that's a case where the person making the decision was incredibly aware of the risk he was taking. So we believe that the future will be multi-cloud, and some of this will be private clouds. I mean, that's my basic response. But we facilitate the work for our customers to be able to leverage multiple clouds at the same time. That's why we invented Zenko. That's why we took some of the Zenko technology to make it as a ring option in SDM. And we're very far in advance compared to anyone else in a hybrid cloud. The fact that we support natively both the S3 API, but also the Azure Blob Store API is a big thing. We have a compatibility between both, so you can store S3 store on Blob and read the same way. Your application can interface via S3 API and store on either one. So yeah, I think that's my answer. Now, from a very short-term perspective, if we meet a potential customer and the customer tells us that he has decided to go full on, put everything in AWS, we just check with them if they have use for Zenko, which they might. And if not, we just go to the next one because they are not a potential customer for us. And that's okay.
Yeah, okay.
You know, there are many companies that are not potential customers for us. That's okay. There's also largely enough for us to grow with the people who need us. Did I respond? I think it was Bertrand speaking.
Yes, it was. It was.
Yeah. No, it's okay for me.
Okay,
no
cool.
Problem.
Okay, so who do we sell to? Healthcare, both hospitals and research, pharmaceutical companies, especially around genomics. They do a lot of simulation. Media entertainment, mostly TV channels that want to, and production house, people who want to have nearline archives that produce a lot of content. They want to keep it, and we'll also power a lot of origin servers for broadcast of the content. Financial services, this really stands for banks and insurance companies. That's a pretty big vertical for us. We power 5 of the top 15 banks of the Western world. We have quite a few very large insurance companies as well. Telco and service provider, that includes some cloud providers. I mean, people may not realize that we do about 35% of our revenue from the cloud itself. So, you know, sure, AWS is not going to use Scality technology to power their cloud, but there's many other tier 2 clouds that do use Scality technology, and so we do benefit from the cloud economy as well, directly, as well as through our enterprise customers who go multi-cloud. And government is actually a fairly large part of our revenue, about 25%. That includes national libraries is a big thing for us. We've got the national library in many countries. Police, armies, especially as they equip themselves with various kinds of video surveillance, body-worn camera is also a pretty big thing. We've got intelligence agencies in several countries as well. And in government, we also have very large research institutions that we consider to be part of the government sector. Very, I mean, supercomputer-sized kind of research institution. So these are the 5 verticals, and you know, one of my job is to always drive our salespeople to go back to these 5 verticals and don't call the people who are not potential customers. So let's do a little bit of focus on healthcare. One of the things that our customers really like is the fact that you can store, you can really consolidate multiple storage silos on Scality. So very typically when we go to a hospital, they have several storage systems. They have some storage system for PACS and essentially managing all their medical images. They have a separate storage system for their IT. They have a separate storage system for their backup targets. They typically have a separate storage system for genomics because that's more research activity for the hospital and was not really integrated by IT. And what we really offer is a system that can take all this into a scale-out approach. And the benefits are a decrease in cost, an increase in reliability, and very often an increase of the time to image for the radiologists themselves. So in hospitals, the doctors themselves are super happy when Scality gets deployed. You here have a customer quote mentioning that it used to take 10 to 15 minutes to read display an image because they were stored on tape, and now with Scality it's about 15 seconds. And you might tell me 15 seconds is very long for a storage system, except that the place where we operate is a place where a few seconds is totally acceptable, and they're benefiting from very low cost of storage for very large quantity of data, allow them to have this kind of response time for pretty much any patient. Well, they used to keep in a pretty expensive SAN system, maybe 1 year worth of data, but not more than that. And now they can keep all the medical images of all the patients, and even if someone comes back 5 years afterwards, the radiologist can pull up the image pretty quickly while the radiologist is seeing the patient. So very, very strong benefit for hospitals deploying Scality. Super happy customers. Yeah, and this is, so to be able to do this, to be able to consolidate, we have relationship with many ISVs in the field of a hospital. On the left, you have the ones who are more medical imaging. On the right, you have those that are more backup. But the point here is that it's really our work with the ISVs of specified industries that make our storage so easy to deploy for customers. And as a result, we deliver more of the benefits. So healthcare is one, especially hospitals. This is our customer APHM, the hospital system in Marseille. It's not just one hospital; it's a hospital system. I can't remember the number of beds, but it serves a population of about 3 million people. And they initially deployed for PACS and then added backup and archiving. For them, it's a real transformation, and they're super happy. That's a typical customer who's reordered twice since they initially deployed Scality.
Jerome, we have another question from.
Go ahead.
It's from Martin, but there are so many of us here. We actually have two Martins. I'm not entirely sure which Martin it is. The question is, are you involved in the Alibaba CT scan project? Oh, it's Martin Hingley. The Alibaba CT scan project.
So the answer is no, but I'll definitely research. And if you want to send me an email afterwards, if Martin wants to send me an email to point me to the right project, we've had on and off talk with Alibaba, so we know each other, but we're not on that project.
Okay, thank you.
But again, we'll definitely research. So this is an example, another example. This is a pharmaceutical company in Boston, and they do a lot of simulation to invent drugs. And this is the example. They used to have 2 data centers, one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast. And with our partner, Weka.io, we were able to design a system where their disaster recovery site is actually AWS. Their application is a file-based application, and they want very high performance. This is a project we actually designed with Weka, and our partner there is Dell. And according to Dell, the file system that's delivered at this customer is one of the 10 fastest file systems in the world. So Weka IO does the very fast file system. The data is in some way cached in Weka IO and then tiered onto the Scality ring in their data center. Then we use our XDM technology to copy the data in AWS, and it's asynchronous bidirectional replication. So if they fail over to AWS, then the data will be able to be copied back onto the main data center. And Weka has also cloud instances, and they have instances of their application in AWS. So the normal, when the data center is up, their application talks to Weka in on-prem, which stores in Scality. Scality copies everything near real time to AWS. That's the normal mode of functioning. You've got an F5 that does the heartbeat. If for any reason the main data center fails, they switch to AWS, where all the data is there, and they spun up the application in AWS, talking to Weka in AWS, and then taking the data from AWS S3. So this is one of the more modern customer in terms of DR in the cloud. It's fully functional, and again, for the customer, it's a tremendous savings. This is a case where the customer has already put 2 additional orders to Scality to increase capacity within 12 months. That customer, I met him a few months ago, just before COVID, and he told me, "You guys are light years ahead of your competition." Needless to say, I was very happy to hear this. Let's go to media entertainment. There again, it's the same concept as hospital. When we arrive in a broadcasting or TV channel, typically they have several storage systems, and they have different storage systems for their CDN, for broadcast, for nearline archive. Typically, it's when we arrive, it's tape, and we're able to consolidate all this. And because we operate at a much lower cost points that typical SAN or NAS, they're able to even put their nearline archive on Scality, which really makes the archive usable if they want to suddenly retrieve the content from the archive and broadcast it. So again, very happy customers there. As you can see on this slide, a lot of partnership with ISVs that are specific to the media industry. And there again, after working with Scality, they quickly realized that they can also put their backup on the same system. So we consolidate multiple systems, typically 3 different systems on a Scality ring infrastructure. This is an example. This is Comhem, Nordic company, content distribution, media company, TV channel. And they use, in the media, one thing that's typical in media is that the way they consume Scality ring is through SMB protocol. So most of our customers, they are SMB. In the case of Comhem, it's NFS, but most of them, most of the media application, the MAM, expect SMB. Achievements typically is at the same time a lower TCO and the availability. The people don't really realize this, but it's funny when we do customer meetings, and I ask customers, okay, what's the thing you like the most about Scality? They typically tell me it doesn't break and it doesn't lose data. And entering the storage industry, I thought that having a storage that's up 24/7 and not losing data was a prerequisite to play in the storage industry. But what I'm hearing from customers is that this probably is not a prerequisite, because they say that that's something we do exceptionally well compared to other offers in the market. We do guarantee to our customers 100% availability. Obviously, any engineer in the room will tell me, well, 100% availability doesn't exist. I've computed the actual availability of our system for our customers, and we're at in production, we're at 5 nines and a half. So 99.9995% is our actual availability stats across all our customers in production. So it's pretty good. Another example is Dailymotion. You might have heard about them because we deployed Dailymotion several years ago, and they've been a reference customer for us. They moved from a traditional scale-out NAS to go to Scality. They now have 31 petabytes of usable storage with us, pretty big, all deployed on HP's the Cell 4540, which is a pretty old machine now. For there it's really about low TCO and 100% reliability that they were after. Banks and insurance. So here there's different use case. It's less about a consolidation story because each of these use cases is really, really big. So they often have several Scality rings. And there may be different reasons why they come. So we find many of the insurance or banks, they just have a IT modernization project and they want to go to cloud IT on-prem. And you know, Scality is a natural piece of this. When they stage their private cloud, they want to have an S3 as a service on-prem. It's really interesting because these kind of companies, you know, they want S3, they want to be completely compatible with AWS S3 API, but then they ask us things that are totally not S3 in philosophy. Like they want to be able to have quota to limit how much a user will consume of the storage. Obviously, the AWS S3 API doesn't have a notion of quota because AWS wants you to consume as much as possible. So we found a way to be able to deliver quota limits within the framework of the S3 API for these bank and insurance companies. So one type is that they just have a modernization project. It's really interesting what we see when they deploy an S3 on-prem cloud is at the beginning it's not very much used, and when developers of the banks figure out that they can use this and that it's really easy to provision, the growth of the demand within the bank is really exponential. So as soon as the developers really realize what they can do with it, they want more and more. We have a lot of backup for banks, working with TSM, with Rubrik quite a lot, with Arman for Oracle backup, I mean, Veritas also quite a lot in the large banks. NAS offload is something that we see more and more. You've probably seen that we launched a NAS archiver technology earlier this year, and many of these large institutions have tremendous amount of NAS, and they realize that the data is not being used, and they could move the data to an object store at a much lower cost, especially if we offer transparency, which is what we do with our NAS archiver. And one of the use cases that we see growing very much is everything around logs and analytics. We work more and more with Splunk for log storage and Spark technologies to be able to interface with big data application. So that's one of the very much growing use case in the financial service industry. So an example of this is our partnership with Group BPCE. BPCE is one of the largest banks in France. They're actually the parent company to several banks, especially Natixis and Banque Populaire. You see all the banks here that are under the BPCE group. It's a really, really large customer. We have two completely separate deployments there, mostly for backup, but huge quantities of backup. Another example, this is taken from an insurance company in the US. Unfortunately, I cannot tell you the name, but it's one of the three largest insurance companies in the US. So that's a case that they were using Cloudera with HDFS, and they moved from HDFS to Scality for the storage using Spark technology. Super happy, saving cost and increasing reliability at the same time. The service provider I talked to you is about 35% of our revenue. We have service provider doing different kind of activities. A lot of B2C, those who've been following Scality since 2009 know that this is really how we launch. We launch on the B2C services from service provider, whether it was webmail or photo sharing services. So we still have quite a lot of that, but we have more and more service providers offering basic infrastructure as a service or doing a little bit more sophisticated backup as a service. Some of them in specific industries, especially we equip quite a few companies dealing with notaries and lawyers who have a responsibility to keep data for a very long time, and this in multiple countries in the world. One customer we're very proud of is Rackspace. You all know that Rackspace really was one of the co-designer of OpenStack and Swift, and yet they are using Scality Ring for some of their workloads when they need more reliability and performance. So I wouldn't claim that we do everything storage for Rackspace. Rackspace has quite a few technology deployed, but it's a really big deployment of Scality, and Rackspace publicly said that they saved $12 million by deploying Scality. So this is a real success. And the reason I have Rackspace here up on the slide is so that you really realize that we are powering some of the big clouds out there. So that it's not always public information, but we are behind many of the tier 2 clouds from an object storage perspective. The other one's Orange, the largest telco in France, obviously. There we have 5 deployments by now. So some of it is consumer webmail, but also for backup, part of their IT department. We also power their CDN for Orange TV. We also have Orange subsidiaries in various countries outside of France. So very, very successful partnership. They have used multiple generations of hardware with us. The slide here talks about HP and IBM storage, but they also have some Supermicro. So they've been able to mix and match different servers, depending on the cost of the server at a given time. Here, they're really the reason for deploying Scality Ring is really a scalability reason first. Obviously, the lower TCO as well, but the first reason was the scalability and the sheer size of growth that they were anticipating, and they now have 24 petabyte deployed, and they're reordering capacity literally every year. Government, as I mentioned, is another of our verticals, very important. Obviously, intelligence services, but also financial services within government. They have the same needs as bank, mass offload, a lot of national libraries, and a lot of big data analytics. Video surveillance is actually quite a strong use case for us. It's not a use case on which we make a lot of money because the cost, the prices for video surveillance are very pressured. We always have to negotiate these deals very strongly, but nonetheless, it's actually a significant use case for us. And in government, but not only government. Typically, one of the hospitals, I can't remember which one, but one of our hospitals has 5,000 CCTV cameras and everything stored on Scality Ring.
Jerome,
Jerome, go ahead.
We have another question come in. This is from Rob Pegler again. And Rob is saying, you mentioned NFS file interface. Do you support NFS version for transport, 4.2 in particular?
So Scality absolutely supports file system. We support NFS and SMB, as well as object storage. And on object storage, we support both the S3 API and the Amazon and the Azure Blob Storage API. So we're definitely a multi-interface. People don't always remember this. We do 50% of our revenue on file. So we're as much a scale-out NAS as we're an object store. And for the very technical part of the question, it was NFS 4.2. Giorgio, could you respond to that?
Yeah, we support NFS 4.2. But customers typically deploy a 4.1 actually.
Thank you. Oh, there's one more question. Fred?
Sorry, I need to unmute myself. No, it just says thank you. That was Rob saying
Okay,
thank
cool.
you.
Okay, great. Okay.
Oh, sorry. One more in. This is from Anthony Adshead at Computer Weekly again. Any idea of the split? Any idea of the split between deployment that access via file protocols and object? I'll read it again. Any idea of the split between deployments that access via file protocols and object?
Yeah. So as usual, I'm going to give you a CEO view. From a revenue perspective, it's about 50-50. Now, if we look at the deployments, typically what we see is typically our largest deployments in terms of volume of data are objects, and typically our NFS SMB deployments tend to, in average, be a little bit smaller. In terms of number of customers, many of our customers, especially in Europe, use both file and object protocol on the same Scality ring. So I'd say definitely more than half of our customers have some file system. And unfortunately, I cannot be more precise than that because I just don't have that stat. But it's very significant. The fact that we can offer both method of storage, first of all, some customers will start with a given application on file and will migrate to object when the application is mature enough. So 2 examples of that. There's a bank who started doing TSM backup, IBM TSM backup on the file interface. And at some point, IBM TSM was good enough supporting S3, and they changed, and they are now using IBM TSM through the S3 interface without changing anything on the ring. Another example of that is Splunk. We interface with Splunk either through file system or through their S3 service, Smart Store it's called. And we have customers that prefer using the file interface, and some customers who prefer using the object storage interface. And I bet you that the ones who use the file interface at some point in their life will switch to object. So it's actually very integral to our strategy, the fact that we support both file and object. As I was saying at the beginning, everyone talks about digital transformation, but to actually do it is difficult. And for many customers, the fact that we have a modern technology that's a software-defined storage with very high reliability and very low cost, and that can be completely compatible with their data center and with their application, which are file, with their authentication and provisioning systems, and that we can really fit right in within their data center without asking them to change anything to the application and security layer, is a very important thing.
Thank you, Jerome. We have one more question. This is from Ulrika Rees. As far as I remember, there were plans of going public. I guess due to the crisis, this has been postponed. What about profitability? Is the company profitable yet?
So we're not profitable yet, but we will be profitable next year, and we're tracking very well towards this metric. And as far as going public, you need a few things to be public, and especially you need a company maturity. Public companies have to be very predictable in their revenue, and we also need the IPO market to be open. We need the investors, public investors, to be interested in the kind of company that we are to go public. I was initially planning to go public in 2017. I had said this publicly, and neither the one nor the other were ready. Scality was not mature enough as a company, and the public market had absolutely no interest in infrastructure or a storage company. Things are changing, and I do expect that there will be a window for a possible IPO of Scality in a couple of years. This is not related to, well, this is not related to COVID. It is actually strengthened by COVID in a weird way, but I do expect public markets to be more conscious about the infrastructure company, as many countries are restarting talks about sovereignty and wanting more of the data to stay within the country.
Okay, thank you. One more question. This is from Tony Locke at Freeform Dynamics. How are developments in different parts of Europe going? Are any countries moving forwards faster or slower than expected or hoped?
Well, I think the country that's definitely, the countries that are surprise for us are Spain, Poland, and Israel. Israel, as everyone knows, is part of Europe. And these countries are growing really, really fast and beyond our expectations. The countries where we are growing more slowly, it's not related to demand, it's related to the ability of Scality to form partnership in these countries.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to move. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was about to say, we have 10 more minutes with Jerome, everyone, and then Jerome has a hard stop. So any further questions, please feel free to jump in now, because then we will move over to Paul and Giorgio. Thank you.
And I guarantee we'll be more technical with that. I'm going to flip through the slide super quickly.
Yeah, sorry, Jerome, one more question, because we know there's so much value in questions. Tony Locke, how are the partnerships development plans going to change? Partnership development plans, how are they going to change?
Given that you just said that your partnerships were not developed as much as you'd liked in some of those geographies.
Yeah, so, you know, I think it's very much people-based, and it's about Scality finding people in these countries that have the relationship and the trust of the ecosystem in those countries. And so I think that the work is on us to find the right people. From a strategy standpoint, our strategy has been the same for several years, and it works. We have very strong relationship with the hardware manufacturers. You all know that we have a very strong relationship with HPE. The relationship with the others are constantly evolving and growing. I mentioned to you a deal that we did with Dell. I mean, Dell is both our main competitor, but we sometimes partner on some deals. We work more and more with Cisco. We work now also with Western Digital, since they sold their Ampli data, got the active scale product. We can work with Western Digital. We work with Penguin in the US. We obviously work with Supermicro. So these partnerships are really strong and very healthy. And we're also developing both in Europe, in Japan, and in the US a VAR network, and that's also going very well. So I'm generally speaking, from a strategy standpoint, we're continuing this, and it's working well. We've also launched an initiative to partner more with ISVs, and we're doing very well there as well. So in the countries where we're not getting the penetration we want, it's really people-based. We need to find the right people.
Thank you, Jerome.
Okay.
We have another question in. This is from, we've got two questions in. Anthony Adse at Computer Weekly again. You said Zenko was a little bit early for multi-cloud. Isn't multi-cloud proving to be a bit of a mirage more widely? A big question in a limited time, I know.
Well, I tried to address this at the beginning. If by the concept of multi-cloud, we think any application running on any cloud, private or public, that's a mirage for now. That's not real. If by multi-cloud we think being able to leverage more than one cloud, whether it's private or public, for specific use cases, that's very real. We have customers who've deployed several private clouds, and they know very well how to leverage the fact that they have multiple private clouds. And we have customers using both Scality on-prem and the public cloud, and moving data appropriately between both and putting different workloads. And for me, that's now very real.
Anthony, I hope that answers your question. If it doesn't, please let me know. Jerome, we have another question. This is from Mary Branscombe. Are you seeing the emphasis on working from home changing Scality customer plans for consolidating storage? Does it change what they think about storing where, or push them more to cloud instead of their own data centers?
No, I cannot say this. It's actually very surprising, but we have seen very little impact of COVID to our activity. There's an obvious impact that for 3 months we couldn't access physically, go to our customer's data center. But you know, we have less than 5% of our active projects that got pushed out because of COVID. That's very minimal. I really cannot say that I see either a stronger or less push to the cloud because of COVID. What I can say is that I see in many countries, including the US, a push for sourcing locally and more questions about sovereignty, generally speaking.
Thank you, Jerome. You have 5 minutes and then you have a hard stop.
Yeah, I'm going. I will eat. I just told my next meeting I'll be late, and I will eat 5 minutes of Giorgio and Paul's time. So NLS, National Library of Scotland, there's a lot of content that you can find that's public. Super happy customer. They just added I think a petabyte of storage during the shelter in place during the confinement. And they did a video of this. Pretty impressive how easily they were able to add capacity using Scality Rig. Obviously, very long-term storage. So,
sorry, Jerome, one more question. This is Anthony following up from what we discussed earlier. He's quoting, any app on any cloud equals a mirage. Isn't that multi-cloud? And what you described is hybrid cloud. So he's saying any app on any cloud equals a mirage. Isn't that multi-cloud? And what you described is hybrid cloud.
So any app on any cloud, in the sense of I want to move any app to any cloud at any moment today, is a mirage. And I know that we used this phrase at Scality a few years ago. You might remember, you might have noticed that we retired this phrase because we realized that this is not real today. Now, on the semantics between multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, I don't know. The fact is, I don't know. I don't have comments on this. The fact is, we have customers using more than one cloud within a workflow. That's a reality, and I showed the case of the pharmaceutical company in Boston using cloud for DR. For me, that call it whatever you want, but it's more than one cloud. So maybe a way to phrase it is we do the reality of the market is hybrid cloud more than multi-cloud. I think that might be true.
Thank you very much. Oh, a question from Roy Ilsley. Any app on any cloud works for container apps, not for traditional apps.
Yeah. And then I will ask how many of the apps of large enterprise are containerized today.
Okay, thank you.
Again, I do think that this is the arrival point. Where we're getting to as an industry is that people will be able to leverage multiple clouds, but we're on a journey.
That's fine. Please carry on, Jerome.
Okay, so I talked about verticals. We have 5 verticals. Another approach to look at our business is for use case, and we really serve 6 use cases: cloud native apps, big data storage, data archive, backup targets, M&E content management, mostly for video, and then medical imaging archive. You know, some of our customers, most of our customers actually have at least 2 use cases, but some of these use cases are specific to an industry, like the medical imaging archive and the M&E content management. Others are really generic, like backup target or big data storage. Now, having this use case approach has allowed us to really form more and more partnership with ISVs that are strong players, and to really come to customers with a full solution. And more, this is what customers demand. And we're currently investing a lot on ISV partnership, marketing-wise, but also technology-wise. We've got a team of 3 people who are constantly focused on integration and checking that as version numbers evolve, we stay compatible with each of these applications. So, you know, at the end of the day, we really want to offer a versatile data platform, object and file, on-prem and cloud. We think that cloud is a serious thing. And again, our approach to the public cloud is to partner with them, especially with Microsoft Azure, because we find that Azure strategy is very hybrid cloud oriented, and they have a lot of relationship with our big enterprise customers. That there's a lot of compatibility there. I have a couple more slides that I wanted to share, and that's why I'm going to steal 5 minutes from Paul and Giorgio to talk a little bit about social responsibility. I know that this is a topic that many companies use to kind of polish their marketing, and I just want to stress that this is a real at Scality. I mean, we really want to have a role in society and to do tech for good. We started this year doing carbon offset. Now, it happens to be that this year in 2020, we've also significantly decreased our travel, but that was beyond our desires. The one thing I would say is we've always invested a lot in video conferencing technology, which allows Scality to transition to working from home very easily, because we were all used to working this way already. And I do expect that, you know, in the world after COVID, I do expect that we will travel less, because we have discovered that it's possible to work with traveling less. In the meantime, we're still offsetting our carbon footprint. We selected an organization called reforestation.com, and we're doing a major project of planting trees this year in France, and next year we'll be planting trees in the US. And what we like with this organization is that they do tree planting. We're going to actually do it with the staff, so people actually touch what we're doing. And for each tree that we plant in the northern hemisphere, they also have a project in the southern hemisphere, working with countries that need help to keep the forest. We launched at the beginning of the year paternity leave program. We're very happy that there are 6 fathers up to now that have already taken advantage of this program to take a month of time off at the birth of a newborn. We're very much promoting women in tech. We signed the Gallion Gender Agreement that was a year ago. And also, you know, through COVID, when this whole pandemic started in Europe and throughout the US in March, We really took great care of supporting our employees. Contrary to other companies that will not name, we actually purposely paid a salary increase 1 month earlier than usual, so that people have financial means to go through this disruption in their lives. We've also extended our sports incentive program to be able to cover things like creativity. We realized that especially for our employees who are single and were locked up in their home and alone, it was really hard to stay sane, and we've been offering various kind of support programs, including professional support when they want to. So we really take great care. A theme that's dear to me is diversity, and we measure engagement of our staff continuously. Our engagement has been raising over the past 12 months, and we're now in the top 25% of tech industry in terms of staff engagement, what's called the eNPS score. We've got 20% of our employees who are female. This is not good enough, but this is getting better, and we're definitely putting a focus on this. The one thing that we're good at is I personally watch pay parity between male and female employee for the same job, and we're pretty good at promoting our female employees. We have the same ratio amongst the managers. We have 20% female, so the same ratio as for total employees in the company. And diversity is also a question of nationality, and in a company that has about 200 employees, we've got 25 nationalities. So we definitely have built a culture that's truly multicultural at heart. Okay, this is where I'm going to stop. Unless there's a last question, I'm going to disappear and give the mic to Paul and Giorgio.
Hi, everybody. It's good to be in front of you again. And we're going to switch gears a bit from Jerome's kind of more business-oriented presentation to a little bit more about technology. Specifically, we're going to talk about open source, which we've been very involved with. We do want to give you a preview of something we're working on in terms of an innovation for data management, especially cloud-based data management. So I expect that Giorgio will join here in a few minutes, or he's on, and we'll show a demo as part of that. So feel free to chime in, and I'll take a breath occasionally and see if there are questions. Just to start, this is kind of our 10-year history of product and also open source innovation. It all starts with Ring, which is our flagship, and everybody, of course, knows about Zenko. Along the way, though, we have published a number of kind of notable to us open source software projects. We started with one of the first open source S3 API server projects. The reason I said first is the way we published this was as a container to be deployed on Kubernetes. So it was kind of cloud native design to start. We carried that forward in Zenko. The design is container based. It does depend on Kubernetes, whether it's deployed in the cloud or on-prem. And we continue to do that. So now we go forward. We've done a co-project together with Microsoft Azure, similar way to publish Azure Blob API. There's a hint here of the next generation platform, and that's where I'll tie in this preview of our data management capabilities. Just to kind of put a top level view on our, embracing of open source. We've been doing it for, 6-7 years. Giorgio might correct me and tell me it's even longer. Some of you might remember that we were big sponsors to OpenStack. Back in 2014, 15, and 16, we were very prevalent. We actually ended up publishing our own OpenStack Cinder and Manila drivers. We did a Swift top end for the Ring. We published we actually sponsored some great parties. I'm not sure if some of you were there, but they were great memories. But along the way, we've really kind of committed to the model of open source and publishing things under an Apache 2.0 license to be very free and open for people to use it. But it's more than that. Our engineers go to the conferences. They work on upstream projects. They contribute comments and code. And we also are a big OpenStack user. We have a huge OpenStack cluster that's through a third party. We work with them, we troubleshoot issues, and we get the changes published back to the upstream. So this is very much something on our mind, and we're very cognizant of it. This is kind of the history. I mentioned OpenStack Cinder. Cloud server is the S3 one, Zenko. We've also along the way done an opinionated distribution of Kubernetes. It's obviously not at the level of a full product, but it's really in preparation for cloud native design of all of our products. We want to be able to deploy in the cloud, and that means Amazon's distribution and Google's distribution, GKE, the services, I should say, running in their cloud. But what about bare metal? And that's where we wanted to be able to have something that's optimal and supported in the bare metal world. So we're seeing some more traction on it. People are starting to do pull requests and more questions on the forum. But again, it becomes the basis for kind of cloud native design going forward. The last thing I'll mention is with Azure, we did it in collaboration with the Microsoft team, the Azure team, and it's in the open source. It's also an Apache 2.0 license. So that is the core technology that we now embrace in Ring, as well as the S3 cloud server for the interfaces, the object interfaces. To provide a little bit of an update on Zenko. So this has now been in the market for about 3 years. We actually originally did the open source publication a year before that. The customers that are really doing multi-cloud today are content distribution customers, M&E. They had a need to really do CDN through multiple clouds. They wanted the freedom to have Azure in some regions and Google in others, and Amazon in other regions. They really want the flexibility of choosing. Many of you know that we've talked about Bloomberg as our kind of lead design partner on that effort. They're in production with Zenko doing content distribution and transcoding to all of the clouds. So that's a real use case. Where we see Zenko also being deployed is in healthcare for archiving to things like Glacier, and now genomics for Cloud DR. That's the core technology also as part of XDM. We are seeing some uptick in kind of the commercial world for ISVs that are embedding Zenko. There's a few examples here. One of the more prominent ones is the Fujifilm Object Archive. That's a recently announced tape solution. Zenko is the S3 server inside. So not only are they using it internally as the S3 endpoint, they've also extended it. So we published Zenko with S3 APIs. They extended it with Glacier APIs. And we're now kind of in the process of them contributing those changes back into the open source. So that's kind of open source at work coming to fruition. A couple of other companies listed here that use Zenko internally. And of course, we eat our own dog food. It's the basis of our own Ring XDM capabilities. A couple of weeks ago, or last week, we announced a deeper integration with Amazon. We have supported S3 as the backend for Zenko since the launch. But what we realized in working with customers is, of course, not everything's a green field. We need to be able to discover and import, import existing objects into the Zenko metadata view from S3 buckets, as well as a model where we're notified asynchronously of changes that applications make to the cloud. So Zenko can be the S3 endpoint, but in many cases, the app just talks to the cloud, and they want Zenko to maintain the namespace through these asynchronous notifiers. Okay, so that's kind of the current state of Zenko. I mentioned this already, but it's worth restating. Zenko is fully cloud native. It's containerized, the S3 cloud server, the Azure blob server, metadata, the workflow engines based on Kafka. We do deploy it on all the various Kubernetes services in the cloud and then leverage our own Metal K8s for bare metal. We're going a step further now. There's new frameworks for monitoring. You may have heard of Prometheus. That's something that we've integrated, and this becomes the basis for the future. Okay, so everything we do in terms of new products from now on will leverage this knowledge and this experience and this code base. Okay, so with that, I wanted to kind of make this a little bit more interesting and talk about something that's coming, and that's what we call visual data management policies. This is a preview of a future technology, but we're happy to talk about it and get reactions to it. So the premise of this is the following. We really see a lot of challenges in cloud data management, and our eye is really on how we can look at this from a simplified point of view. How can we make it possible for non-developers and non-experts to define the ability to take data that's on-prem and put it in the cloud, or move it between clouds, or really sort of arbitrary kind of data management policy. So that's the premise that we started with here. So if we go forward, when we started talking to customers, I can tell you we heard dozens and dozens of different use cases. If you ask them, what do you want to do with data in the cloud? You hear Well, I want to take my data out of Amazon and put it in a cheaper cloud. Or I want to take it from the cloud and put it on-prem. All kinds of data migration examples. Or they want to move or copy data, replication of data between clouds. The common one, of course, is tier my data. Take my data that's older and put it in a cheaper cloud service. And then it gets more sophisticated, right? Move my data based on time. I want it to follow the sun. Or I want you to move the data yourself based on what's lower cost. So it starts getting more complicated from there. But you can quickly see that what they're asking for is something custom, right? What they want is something that fits their business policy. So they'll ask questions like, you know, what policy rules can I apply? Can I insert my own? Can I use metadata as a way to make decisions about the data? And, you know, they want to do this within the context of sort of a standard API. And we've used Amazon's S3 as that policy kind of mechanism for defining these policies. But it's a bit constrained, right? Because at this point, Amazon can support things like replication and lifecycle tiering. We may want to go beyond that, right? So there's questions around how far we should go. So this is, again, the challenge for us. When we started out and we went to the market with Zenko and XDM, we said, let's simplify around the problems that we hear about, right? And those are the three that Jerome already spoke about: cloud archiving, bursting data to the cloud for compute bursting of some sort, like transcoding, and then having a synchronous copy in the cloud for DR. These are all supported today, and it's things like replication, that can be one-to-one, it can be one-to-many replication, it can also be tiering, transition policies from on-prem to cloud. And by the way, it doesn't have to be from on-prem to cloud, it can be cloud to cloud, it can be cloud to on-prem. That's something we're hearing about quite a bit now as well. But in any case, we focused it down to really make it manageable to solve that problem. Okay, so that's what's in Zenko today, is this sort of global namespace. I can view data across multiple clouds. Those clouds include all the hyperscalers, but also a few of the smaller ones like Wasabi and DigitalOcean. Somebody had asked about Alibaba earlier. That comes up a bit because we hear about the data sovereignty problem in China. So Alibaba might be the preferred cloud for that. We can certainly support that going forward. But the data management policies are replication, data lifecycle management, and that means expiration and lifecycle tiering, okay, across all of these different backends. So where do we go from here, okay? And one of the ideas is custom data management. I can give you a few policy examples. One of them might be an edge use case. Let's say we have some kind of data in the car, in autonomous vehicles being captured, things like video or sensor data. If you're capturing tons of video data as a car is driving, you may not want to send all of that back to a public cloud or a private cloud. So some kind of pre-processing, some kind of image extraction or metadata tagging, that could be a custom policy. Another one that's easy to think about, of course, is data sovereignty. With GDPR, how do you know where your data is? What country is it in? What region? Maybe you want a policy that enforces that. And that's something that we could track with some kind of metadata tagging and rules on top of that. And since we deal a lot with healthcare, they have tons of medical images. They need it for research, but guess what? It's tagged with personal information. They may need some kind of extraction that anonymizes the images before it's sent to researchers so that they can identify the patients themselves. So those are three kind of simple examples. But how do you do that, right? And the way to do that is to really think about policies that have custom rules. Those custom rules could be simple decisions like if-then decisions, but they could be more sophisticated. They could be logic that you insert. They could be some program code. They could even be a cloud function. You might call out to an Amazon function or a cloud service like in Azure for video indexing. And then they could, of course, involve different types of baseline functions, compress my data, dedupe my data, etc. So what we thought is, rather than talking about it, let's give you an idea of what we're working on. So we have a running prototype of what we call a visual policy editor that works against this workflow engine. And this workflow technology is in the product. It's been in the product now since the inception of Zenko. It's an asynchronous kind of queuing engine that can manage data processing behind the scenes. We've now externalized it through APIs and brought it forward through this policy editor. So I think with that, maybe Giorgio, you've unmuted, and I can hand it off to you for a quick look at the demo running.
The way you think about Zenko is you have to configure all your different storage entities. So in here, I have an Amazon bucket, I have a remote Scality ring, and I have a local file system, which is basically if you have Zenko at the edge, you want to use existing storage, maybe in a VM. So that's a way to leverage that. And you would go and create as many locations for as many storage you want Zenko to manage. So just as an overview, so the Amazon support, we have a native support for Ceph that's useful for on-prem deployment where people want to move data from Ceph to Ring, for example. DigitalOcean, Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure, we talked about that. The NFS is about mounting Isilon and NetApp. So we do a lot of tests on Isilon because of our media customers. Hyperdrive is something we'll talk about maybe at the next Tech Live. It's a new technology from Scality. And then Scality Ring, Wasabi being another cloud provider. So you would go and define all your location. You can also do things like limiting the capacity per location. So at the edge, it's kind of useful to say, don't consume more than 50 gigabytes on that particular location, and then tier it to something bigger. So in my example, I have 3 locations. Then the workflow engine exists today, but it's kind of policy that we hard code really to closely mimic the Amazon APIs. So you have the replication. So for example, you could say, I want to replicate from this bucket that's local, and I want to send it to AWS. So if I were to save this, it will automatically monitor that bucket and replicate all the data to Amazon. You can do lifecycle, which is based on a bucket. You can expire object and delete them automatically, or you could transition object to another cloud. Okay. So these are all kind of a hard-coded policy that people are using today. And we've been thinking, how can you give the entire power of this engine to the user without them having to understand too much about how it works inside. So that's when we started to work on a UI for this, that we call the build your own workflow. So the workflow policy editor. So let me add a blank one just for the demo. So think of it as the data ever goes into the system, or you do search on. So ads or input. So if the data comes from this bucket or the data comes from another bucket, you can also filter the object, or you can do a metadata search. So based on a search criteria, then you can decide to apply processing to this data. So the simplest thing you can do is tag it. So I need to link this together. So I could tag and add a take live value true, for example, and this will automatically tag this object. And now this metadata can be searched in the system. I can also do things that are a little bit more involved and apply code on this data. And there's multiple ways you can do it. You could actually do it locally. Fission is an engine in Kubernetes to do that. Or you can call external clouds. So if you have something that doesn't have a lot of compute power, you could actually use the cloud to do that. So AWS will call Amazon, Azure, Functions, and Google Cloud. So we support all the major clouds. This processing can either change the data itself, and then it will automatically make a version so that you don't lose the previous version of the object. And you can also add tags after your processing. So based on these tags, you can make a decision. So if this tag equals, and then you can do things like string matching. You can also do simple things like date, and then you will understand the date format properly and do things like 5 days. Okay. And based on the result, you can either not store that object and exit, or update the method and actually see it. Okay. So that's kind of the idea. Can I build my own policy, call into my own services, and this service can be local or distant? So let me show you something that actually works. So there's this TensorFlow example where I'm going to use this Fission engine to actually call a TensorFlow code that's running locally. And the one I want to demo today is using a service from Azure, which is called the Vision service. So all the objects that come into the demo workflow, the demo workflow bucket, sorry, are going to be sent to Azure Vision service for tagging, and then we will update our metadata. So why is it?
Sorry,
Yes?
Giorgio, can I interrupt a second? We have a question that's come in from Chris Evans. And the question is as follows. How is this solution optimizing bandwidth between locations, one acceleration, dedupe, compression, etc.? Second question, how can I manage the impact of applying a change in terms of cloud costs? So the first one is about how is this solution optimizing bandwidth between locations, one acceleration, dedupe, compression, etc. So would you like to answer this one first?
Yeah, I'll answer this one first. So we're not trying to optimize at this stage. We'll give multiple options so that the user can do things locally. So I would not use the Azure Vision service if Zenko is not in Azure, for example. With Azure Stack, we can also call into a local Azure Stack service. But the idea is that you choose the cloud that's closest to where Zenko is running so that you save on bandwidth. But we're not going to automatically route traffic in different ways.
Okay, thank you. And the second question is, how can I manage the impact of applying a change in terms of cloud costs?
Yeah, so we're not there yet in terms of being able to do that. I've done a few demos of the workflow engine, and this has come up quite a bit. So that's something we need to work on. Okay,
then Rob Pegler has jumped in. Rob's question is as follows. When connecting a Zenko instance to NFS, is the NFS server's namespace now managed by Zenko, or is it still separated? Put it another way, how does the Zenko namespace discover changes made by the NFS server? For example, newly created file, deleted file, etc. Yeah. It sounds from your description that the namespaces are separate. Can you please clarify?
Yeah, I'm going to clarify. Yes, so that's a great question. So the in the latest Zenko release, you have the ability, the 1.2 that was released a few weeks back, you have the ability to keep the namespace in sync. And it requires integration with the system to be efficient. So on a Linux host, we're going to be able to get events from the system so that we don't have to scan to keep up to date. On Iceland and NetApp today, we don't have a tight integration, so it's going to be based on listing periodically. So you want to do that in the background and not do that too often. But we have a use case in media where it's a lot of large files, or we actually scan the Iceland system to keep the namespace up to date. Okay. So Zenko sees the same data as what's on Iceland, for example.
Thank you very much. Rob, let us know if this doesn't answer your question. Mary, no, Rob said that clarifies it. Thank you. Two more questions. One is from Mary Branscombe. This all seems extremely manual. How do you scale it and automatically apply policy? Are you looking at open policy agent and Rigo support here?
So the way we're thinking at it is per vertical and use case. And I've been working with a few hospitals. It sounds that we'll be able to deliver existing workflows pre-built that actually address a specific problem, so that the end user only has to insert credentials and change a few of the small variables, but don't have to build the workflow themselves because they'll be too complex.
Okay, thank you. We also have, oh no, okay. Brian, you had a question, but I take it you don't want me to answer it now. You said it was stuck in your paste buffer, okay? Giorgio, carry on, thank you.
Okay, thanks for all these questions. So why tagging of the object? You know, that's something we talk about metadata being very important, but actually a lot of data from file system doesn't have metadata, and a lot of object data doesn't have like homogeneous metadata for each of the objects. So some of the question is, how can we automatically extract metadata from the files? So this will do that by discovering what's inside the file. So that's what I'm going to demo right now. So I'm going to explore. So this is where you would see all the namespaces inside of Zenko. Only have one bucket right now. So I'm going to open that bucket. There's a car picture in there. And let me, you won't be able to see the images because I'm only showing that screen, but that's window. That's okay. So I'm going to add 3 more. Oops, it didn't work as I expected. Do that again. Forget to click on upload. Let me do that now. Okay. Okay. So now what's happening is in the background, the workflow engine is running. So this was an existing image in there. So if I open it, you will see it has 21 tags. And this has been, these tags came automatically from the Azure service. And these are basically probability that the image contains a particular feature. So there's a sky at close to maximum probability. It's outdoor and there's a road and there's a car in it. Let me look at what I just uploaded right now. Should have been processed, no, not yet. That's a part of a demo where I'm hoping that everything is going to go according to plan. Let me check all this metadata. Oh. Okay, let's give it a second. Is there any question why this is processing?
Sorry, what I said when I was muted was no, not at the moment, unless anyone would like to jump in.
Okay, so while it's doing this, I'm just going to show how you can use that then for searching. So all this metadata, you know, Zenko kind of index all the metadata. So now I can search for these tags. So there was a car, for example. So if I do this metadata search, it will find all the files that match this particular image, this particular tag, which was car. And you see that our metadata search understands types. So you can do things like greater than. It's not just text-based. So it supports dates. It supports integer floats. So you can really build some policies around that. I'm using the UI. This is all API based. So a customer will actually use the API and not actually use the UI. But it's a good way to do a demo for that.
So really in summary, I guess what we wanted to show you is this preview of more advanced data management capabilities that we're planning for release next year. This is in the open source. It will be published in the open source, so it kind of continues our theme on that. We do think that making this part of the data platform will be of use, and I should flash forward again to where I was. One of the things that we believe is that this can help kind of centralize data governance. For example, a data ops person or a governance officer could define these policies. We also do plan to ship predefined policies for certain unique vertical industry business problems, but it sort of reduces the problem of managing this kind of data management policy in separate applications. We see that as harder to enforce or harder to scale. So one central location for doing that. But moreover, we really wanted this to kind of be one more example of how we're committed to open source. We're staying involved in the communities and really using these design principles to ensure that the software we build can run everywhere so that the customer has a choice. And we continue to kind of focus on new innovations, especially now in cloud data management. We do think it's real and evolving beyond hybrid cloud. So we want to make this simpler so that it becomes something that more people can access.